Welcome back to class time. It is now time for Cape Sociology. I am your teacher, Georgia Crawford Williams, and today's topic is culture. Yes? So, let's get into it. Now, you all know that as it relates to me, well, I don't see my screen moving, but that's fine. So I will sort it out in a moment or two. But you know that we have to do a recap. Once it is that you start a topic, once it is that you are going to run into a particular, once it is that you're going to a particular class, you have to ensure that you look at what you had done before. So in our previous classes, we looked at the perspectives, we looked at sociology and what sociology is, etc., etc. Now, key question, first thing, what is sociology? You cannot be a sociology student and you can't define sociology. So you have to ask yourself that. And if your response is not that sociology is a study of society and why it exists, then it means you don't know. Yes, and that's a problem. Good. So then we'll ask you how many perspectives exist. Yeah? Now I'm asking you questions that will come on your multiple choice exams. Now, when I ask you how many perspectives exist, many of you will be tempted to say 4, and that is incorrect. We don't have 4 perspectives. We have a myriad of perspectives, but we have 4 major perspectives. And the major perspectives are functionalism. We have the conflict perspective, and for that we looked at the Marxist theory. We have interactionism and feminism. So ensure when it is that I get here, it can't be that you're replacing knowledge. You must be building on. And so you must always try to recap, yeah? And so another key question, who is the key functionalist? That's one key question, man. And if you don't know Emile Durkheim, you have a problem. You have a problem. You understand? Because Durkheim is also called the father of sociology. Give me the name of a key interactionist. Think about it. Think about it, man. Don't just wait on the answer. Yeah? And so you need persons like George Herbert Mead. You need persons like Charles Cooley. So you ensure that once it is that you come for a class, whether it's a class with me or it's a class with your teacher, a recap is done. Once it is that you take up a sociology book, and I'm taking it for granted that you're going to take up a sociology book, because we don't start study for exam when it's 2 weeks before exam. You understand what I'm saying? Then you do a recap. What did I do before? What can I recall? What names can I remember? Because you cannot do sociology if you don't know the names of the sociologists. I've said it before. A sociology essay or a sociologist without names is like a historian without dates. Are you following what I'm saying? Now, culture is a topic under Module 1. Some of you have never looked at your syllabus. And the syllabus free online, and some of you have never looked at your syllabus. Now, you must know where the topics fall, because that will tell you how you are actually examined. Are you following me? Now, culture is a topic under Module 1. Module 1 actually has 2 other topics, culture being the main one. Culture is the most tested topic on your multiple choice exam, because you know that your exam has 3 elements. There is a multiple choice component, there is your IA component, and then there is your big paper, we call it the essay component. Now, as it relates to your multiple choice component, which is 20% of your exam, culture is the most tested topic. Yeah? Now, it is also important to note that culture is also a big part of your big paper, your essay paper, right? And it comes many times, it is combined with many different topics. So you must have a full grasp of culture if you're going to do well in the exam. Good? So we start with a definition of culture. Every topic that you do, you must have a definition. The definition of culture is given to us by Ralph Linton. Now, Ralph Linton can be RALPH depending on which book you're looking at. Luckily, we don't care as much. But Ralph Linton's definition, though, you must know it word for word. Let me go again. You must know it verbatim. You should be able to go into an exam, and once you see a culture essay, you can write out the full Ralph Linton definition of culture. And he says that the culture of a society is the way of life of its members, the collection of ideas and habits which they learn, share, and transmit from generation to generation. That is key. Yeah, you must know it. When it is that you start your culture essay with the definition by Ralph Linton, all of a sudden you look bright. And we want to ensure so we look what? Bright in our exam. Good? So you must know the definition of culture. The culture of a society, the way of life of its members. The collection of ideas and habits which they learn, share, and transmit from generation to generation. But you all know that because when we looked at the functionalist perspective, you also heard the term culture, which says that it is the norms and values of the society. Same thing. Now, there are two components of culture or categories of culture. There is material culture and there is non-material culture. Now, material culture is the physical aspects of culture, the tangible aspects of culture, the things that you can touch, yeah, and you can't see. So, for instance, if we're looking at Jamaica, the material culture is a rice and peas on Sunday. That's the material culture. The material culture is the dandy shandy ball, at least in my era when we used to play dandy shandy. Yeah, that is the material culture. The football, because everybody still play football, the cricket bat. Yeah, in Trinidad, the steel pan. That is the material culture. Now, when you talk about non-material culture, it is the intangible aspects of culture, the abstract aspects that you can't see, but you know that they're there. So, for instance, we're talking about, the music, dancehall music. That's the material, the non-material culture, sorry. Reggae music, non-material culture. The proverbs, non-material culture. The stories, non-material culture, right? So, if it is that you look at this example, when you look at this family, wonderful Jamaican family going to eat Sunday dinner, the food on the table is the example of the material culture. The fact that they believe you should pray before, the prayer which you can't see, yeah, but you know that it is a habit, it is something that you should do, a norm, then that is non-material culture. Good? Now, when you go to exams, and I always say to people, when I do a lesson, I am loving that you are learning. It's about the knowledge, but it's also about the preparation for exams. And so you should be thinking, what sort of questions can I answer? Yeah? Popular questions and culture is where they ask about non-material. But instead of saying non-material, they say what component of culture is tangible or intangible. And because you know it, you know it's either material or non-material. You're following what I'm saying? Good? All right, so not just getting the knowledge now, but it's also the use of knowledge so that we can be properly prepared for the exam. Now, the other key thing that we have to know are the characteristics of culture. You must know every characteristic of culture. I made it clear in the initial part of the lesson that one of the most tested topics on your multiple choice is culture. And these are the sort of questions they ask. What are the characteristics of culture? Culture is learned. Culture is shared. Culture is transmitted, culture is adaptive, culture is dynamic, and culture is symbolic. And we're going to go through them, right? I always give a little acronym. I say it's LSTADS, LSTADS. Yeah? So that's the characteristic of culture, the characteristics. So culture is learned. What does that mean? Think about it. Culture is learned. Now, many times when I ask this, students say it means that culture is taught. But not necessarily. That means that is the layman answer. But culture is learned. It means that culture is not innate. You're never born with it. You don't automatically know your norms and values. You actually have to learn it via observation or via instruction. Yeah? So when we say culture is learned, it means that it is not instinctive. And that is very important because when we get into socialization, there is a huge topic called the nature-nurture debate, where there are some sociologists who are saying to us that that's not true. Your norms and your values are actually instinctive. You don't have to learn it. But the majority of sociologists agree that culture is learned. You don't born knowing what to do. If it is that you are a Jamaican child, meaning that your parents are Jamaican, but you were born and adopted in Japan, you don't automatically talk patois because you're Jamaican. No, you actually speak the language that is taught to you or the language that you learn via listening or observation, that sort of thing. So culture is learned. The other thing about culture is that culture is shared. For it to be a part of the culture, the majority of the society have to agree that this is a norm that we adhere to, that this is a value that we believe in, that we actually believe that this is right. Culture is shared. Now, if you and your people alone do it, that can't make it a part of the Jamaican culture just because you do it all the time. So I remember I was in a class once and I asked, give me an example of Jamaican culture. And a young lady said, curry mango. And when she said it, I had no idea what she was talking about. And many of my students didn't know either. Now, it is a norm for her family and possibly even her community because she was of Indian descent. But for the majority of Jamaicans, curry mango is not a norm. Yeah? And so you can't say it's a part of our culture. So I will ask a question. Is locks a part of our culture? Locks that Rasta wear, etc., or fashion dreads, is it a part of our culture? Now, in reality, locks, though associated with Jamaica, is not necessarily a part of our culture, because probably about 2% of our population have locks. Yeah, it is not really shared. So even though it is associated with us, as it relates to this characteristic of culture, is not necessarily a part of the Jamaican culture. As a matter of fact, false hair might be more of a part of our culture than locks because of the amount of people that adhere to or believe that it is okay. Are you following what I'm saying? Good? Now, another definition of culture, another characteristic, of culture is transmitted. Culture is transmitted. Culture is transmitted means that it must be passed down from generation to generation. If culture is not transmitted, then it disappears. Let me go again. Culture needs to be transmitted. It has to be passed down from generation to generation. We are still cooking ackee and saltfish the same way we used to cook it during slavery. Why? It is passed down from generation to generation. We're still doing cornrow hairstyles and, plaits and so forth the way they used to do it in Africa. Why? Because it is being passed down from generation to generation. Some of the words that we use. And I tell you, when it is not transmitted, then automatically it disappears from our culture. So some of our proverbs, because they're not transmitted, we find that they're disappearing. Yeah? So there's a time that a Jamaican parent would not speak without a proverb being inserted somewhere. Or because we spend so much time with our grandparents, etc., we know the Jamaican proverbs. No, we might say to you, Chicken Mary, and you don't know how to done it, because it's not actually transmitted. Me say Chicken Mary, and you don't know say Ark the near. Yeah? Because it is not transmitted. Me might say one cocoa, and you don't know a full basket. You're following what I'm saying? And that's because it might not be transmitted. If culture is not transmitted, it disappears. Yeah? Me say, cow no know. You know the use I'm till, and you don't know what we say. You understand what I'm saying? Alligator go river bottom, and I start wonder what me I talk about. Because culture is not being transmitted. If the proverbs are not transmitted, it disappears. Are you following what I'm saying? And it is not just the language, it's not just the words, but even some of your pastimes. Yeah? If it is that you don't play the same game, your mother never show you how to play dandy shandy. Yeah? I remember when my daughter was at prep school, they had a game day, and I came in and I wanted to play dandy shandy. Yeah? And one of the things I was telling them is that tips is a out and cock up is a 10. And there were so many of the children who were saying that we really can't say that. You can't say cock up because it don't sound right. You follow what I'm saying? Because they are not used to the game. Now, when I was growing up, everybody know you can't start the game without your say so. Yeah? But that's because it's no longer being transmitted. You find that it's disappearing. Good? Now, another key characteristic of culture is that culture is adaptive. Culture is adaptive. That speaks about it being able to change with the environment. So if the environment changes, then you find that your norms and values will change as well. If because of technological advancement, new things are introduced, you will find that your norms and values will change again. So for instance, when you look at the cellular phone, that has changed our norms and values, has changed our culture. When I was growing up, you would leave your yard in the morning and you don't come back till the evening and nobody not talk to you till you reach home. Your mother don't talk to you and she never think about it. Now, when it is that it reach 2 o'clock, your mother call her, ask which part you're there. Yeah? If she not get you, she call all police because she can't contact you. Yeah? Because the culture has changed. It has adapted to the cellular phone. Another big example is the television. Yeah, and I'm aging myself a little bit, but just remember that I'm 25. Just keep that in your minds forever, yeah? But when I was growing up, TV used to sign off. And so I don't remember what time it used to sign off. It was 9 or 12 o'clock, but I don't remember. But when TV signed off, it meant that you no longer had the television as a means of entertainment. And so you would have to find different ways to entertain yourself. And so you used to play Whole Heap Ring game. I used to make up Whole Heap story and things like that because the people of the community and the children in particular would get together and find time now, find things in order to fill the time. You don't do that anymore because you have a 24-hour television cycle. yeah? Or you have social media. And so the culture has adapted to that, and so you tell less story. When we were younger, the little one, they might tell a Nancy story. Yeah? You start know about black man, white man, and Chinese man. When you get little older, you turn teenager, you start get little out of order, you start talk about big boy. Yeah? All of these things. But you don't do it anymore because you have other things to fill the time. And so the norms have changed, have adapted to that change in the era of society. When culture is adaptive, it changes with the changes in the era. Which is similar but different from culture being dynamic. Culture is dynamic means that culture will change from era to era and from society to society. And so the things that your grandmother used to do or used to believe is correct is very different from the things that you do right now. Which is why them say there is a generation gap. You ever hear them say that yet? A generation gap. Your mother just can't understand. Yeah? Sometimes I don't understand my students either. When it is that I hear them say certain things or them do certain things, I say, no man, this can't make sense. Like, how come? I remember when tattoos were taboo. When if it is that you wore a tattoo or you wear more than one, then you must be a certain type of person who more than likely would be deviant. If you brought home a young man to introduce to your parents and them have all like the sleeve tattoo now with the whole hand full of tattoo, no time can't pass the gate. Like where you go with that? That was the sort of view. But now tattoos are very commonplace because the culture is what? Dynamic. It changed from era to era. Yeah, there are certain things that you guys will do and say where we don't never think. Me, I say, no man, but that's a blasphemy. You can't say that. Yeah, don't call the Lord name in vain used to be a big thing for us. No, we here on to say it just now. I'll just write it out for nothing at all. I'm like, what's happening? But that's because of the generation gap. Culture is dynamic. But it also means it changed from society to society. And so what is normative in one society might be abnormal in another society. So if it is that you go to Trinidad or, well, let's move out to the Caribbean. If you go to some countries in Europe, you might see norms and values that we don't have. Yeah? That we think, like the Italians kiss a lot. Mwah, mwah. You meet your friends and you kiss. Mwah, mwah. Even the men will do that. In Jamaica, if you don't see your friend from when? Say school start back. And you see your brother, and you run and you agree. Mwah, mwah. Everybody's like, what? What's happening? Because it's not a part of our culture. Yeah? So you have the Scottish people that wear skirts. It's called the kilt. It's a ceremonial garment. So when it is that the man is getting married, he might wear it. If you're Jamaican and you're getting married and your father ever see your husband come in a skirt, and that's a wedding mash up, right? That's all. Him not even get to come in at church, yeah? Because the culture is different. And that is showing that culture is dynamic. Good? Then we have that culture is symbolic. That's a key thing as well. Culture is symbolic. It means that there are unique representations within each culture that only the people from the culture understand. Yeah? And when we talk about it, for instance, the language. Your language is just a set of symbols. Each word represents something to you who are a part of the culture. So, for instance, if you speak English within your culture, then the word chair represents something that you can sit on. Because I am also an English speaker, when you say chair, I understand that it is something that I can sit on. Because we have the same symbols. But symbols are not only verbal, they're non-verbal as well. When you kiss your teeth in Jamaica, you know that is annoyance. Yeah? That is why if you kiss your teeth in the class, the teacher gets vexed. Because you know that you are being disrespectful because you are showing that I am annoyed with you. I don't know why I'm in here. I'm tired of you. Just to kiss a teeth alone, that show all of that. And we understand it because we are from the same culture. Yeah? So you find that within the culture, you have symbols that are unique to the culture. The reason you understand when the person hits them teeth is because you're from the same culture. And I remember I was watching an Olympics one year, a long time ago, and there was it was like a 4x4. And in the 4x4, one of the guys on the leg, he fell. So him get the baton and him drop and him get up and him run again. And I think him come like second in. And it was like a big deal in Jamaica because the youth just get up and push out, you know? And we were all so happy. And when it was that they were interviewing him, you know, they said to him, so tell us what happened. And he said, well, I was there and, you know, the race started and then I fell, because, you know, we Jamaicans, when we started the interview, we put on a little twang, yeah? And then I fell and I just kin papa lick and I get up and run again. Now, when he says so, you know, the man I say, huh? Yeah, no, but everybody in Jamaica, because we are from the same culture, we're like, oh, him kin papa lick, you know, which is a somersault. So him get up and him run again. That's because we understand it. Other things as well, same Olympics example. I remember Melanie Walker. And she used to do 400-meter hurdles, I believe. And she had it superstar. Like, she win gold on top of gold. Every Olympics, every world championship, everything. She had it like top. And I remember one Olympics, you know, when they're at the start line, they would go to the favorite. And the camera went on her and she comes so, which is really kind of the dirty wine. And when we as Jamaicans saw it, we're like, Ray, because we know that she had ill wish, just to say hello to our people. But the announcer was like, that was an interesting stretch there. Yeah, that one is different because he is not from the what? The culture. So culture is what? Symbolic. Good? Now, key, the characteristics of culture, all 6 different questions you can find on the characteristic of culture. Now, other key terms when you're doing culture, structural universals and cultural universals. And that's all we're doing today, mainly the key terms. Our structural universals are issues or problems that every single society will actually beat upon. Every single society have these issues and they must be addressed if it is that the society is to progress. Those are structural universals. So for instance, every society must solve the issue of communication. Every society must solve the issue of deviance. Every society must solve the issue of entertainment because that's how people are. So those are structural universals. They're universals because they're found everywhere. Good? And then you have the cultural universals. The cultural universals are the solutions to the structural universals. So you need to find a solution to the issue of communicating, then that solution is language. Language is the cultural universal found in every society. They have a language because they had an issue of communication. You have to solve the issue of deviance. Then in every society, you find that there's a judicial system because it is the cultural universal which solves the issue of deviance. Are you following what I'm saying? Key terms. Multiple choice exams filled with key terms. Defining, identifying. You must know. Good? All right. So we're doing the key terms of culture today. The next one we're going to talk about is ideal culture. Ideal culture, and then there's real culture. Ideal culture speaks to the norms and values that the society professes to hold. It's the norms and values that me and you say we have. That's the ideal culture. Good? So for instance, in Jamaica, we all say that we're an honest society. Honesty is the best policy. That's what we believe. That's the ideal culture. That is what we say. But then there is real culture. The real culture, the norms and values that you actually possess. The things that you actually do. So even though you claim say honesty is the best policy, you still depend finders, keepers, losers, weepers. That is your reality. The honesty is the best policy is just what you say. That's the ideal. But the real is that you see the people them pen pan the ground and you take it up and carry it to your yard, you thief it. Yeah? That means that you're really not as honest as you said before. Yeah? So in every society, you have real culture and ideal culture. If I should come to you right now and I say, how regularly do you have a bath? You say to me, I have a bath 3 times a day, or I have a bath 2 times a day. That's the ideal culture. In reality, you're not bathe from about Tuesday. Because you say you're not going away. So you just come out of your bed. You understand? If your mother not come said to you, right now if she's looking at your ears, she can plant corn. But ideally, you're like, no man, every day. Yeah, that's the ideal culture. In every society, there's the ideal culture and then there is the real culture. Now we need to note these key terms, right? We need to note these key terms. Now, as it relates to culture, another key term is subculture. And I don't like when my slides have whole heap of information, but as it relates to sociology, when you have definitions, you must know who say what. So Farley gave us the definition of subculture, right? Write down his name. Write down his name, because when you go in an exam now and you're going to write about subculture, you say according to Farley, and the examiner say, oh, the one I move so bright, ticky. You understand? So you could have given your own definition, but you don't get as much marks and you want to look bright. So write down Farley's name. But a subculture really is just a culture that exists within a mainstream culture. So every society have their mainstream culture, the norms and values that everybody share. But then within that mainstream culture, you might have a group of individuals that share the majority of the norms and values of the mainstream, but them have certain norms and values that are unique to them. Them have certain things where only them do. And so they're a part of the subculture. So if you look at the Jamaican society, the Adventist group is an example of a subculture. The Adventist group, them do the majority of things where other Jamaicans do. But them have certain norms and values that are unique to them. For instance, they worship on a Saturday, where the majority of Jamaicans worship on a Sunday. They believe that after sundown, or people say after 5, some of them, but in reality, after sundown, you're not supposed to be doing anything on a Friday night. Yeah? That Saturday is not a work day. That many of the Jamaicans might not adhere to. They don't believe they should eat pork. That is a part of their culture, and so there are subculture, a culture within a culture, like how you have subset. Then you have now the counterculture. A counterculture is similar to a subculture in the sense that it is a culture that exists within the mainstream culture. Yeah, so they exist within a society and they might share many of the norms and values of the mainstream culture, but they have certain norms and values that are unique to them. However, whereas the subculture tries to coexist with the mainstream culture, the counterculture rejects the mainstream culture. The counterculture says that my norms and values are right, and uno over there, so the rest of the society, your norms and values are wrong. So radical Rastas, because you have some Jamaican Rastas who are more radical Rastas, they would be an example of a counterculture. So the Adventists would say to you, I don't eat pork, but if you want to eat pork, that's up to you. They're a subculture. The Rastas say, I don't eat pork, and you don't eat pork neither, but not pork. Yeah? That's why it's a counterculture. Good? So the counterculture said, no man, Babylon system have to go down because those things are overall wrong. Rasta man mix up in a Babylon. Those sort of things are because you believe that Babylon, which is really the mainstream culture, is incorrect. Whereas the actual culture, the counterculture, Babylon culture is incorrect, but the counterculture, which is their culture, is correct. You must know the difference between a subculture and a counterculture. Notice I didn't say you must know the definition. You must know the definition as well. But there's a difference between a definition and a difference. The difference between the sub and the counterculture is that the subculture tries to coexist with the mainstream culture, whereas the counterculture goes against, rejects the mainstream culture. Then you also must know who gave you the definition of subculture, which is Farley. You have to remember the exact date and thing, but if you want to show off, I mean, a girl show off bad. So if you want to show off, you write all the date, because you want to show, say you study, you come in for one. You understand what I mean? Good? Excellent. Now, because we just spoke about the counterculture, another key term for culture is ethnocentrism. When you're ethnocentric, you believe that your culture is superior. And so your norms and values are right. And you judge everybody else by your cultural standards, which means them not knowing what you're doing, so them wrong. Jamaicans are very ethnocentric. We believe that our norms and values are right, and everybody else's norms and values are wrong. As a matter of fact, we say that are rubbish. That's the sort of thing. If it is not something that we do, our kind of foolishness that sort of thing. Yeah? That's how we are. If it's not music that we appreciate, turn it off. Turn it off. We'll be like, I don't listen to rap music are rubbish. Not that you don't like it, you decide, say, it is that. total foolishness. To the extent that if we don't like what you're singing, we'll fling and lick you with a buckle. That is how ethnocentric we are. You are not even allowed to sing because of foolishness. Yeah? So we are ethnocentric. We believe that our norms and values are right and everybody else's own is wrong. That is why we have so much conflict as well, you know. You cuss your brethren just because him disagree with you, you know. Because you say the artist is a big artist. I say, what you idiot? And what him just say? What him say? And so you have to fight because we are ethnocentric. But ethnocentrism is not always bad. Yeah? Understanding that your norms and values are good builds pride in your society. Also, it allows you to stand for something. Because you know, if you don't stand for nothing, then you fall for anything. So if you have an understanding of what is right and wrong, you know what to stand for. Good? But ethnocentrism leads to lots of conflict, as we can see. You guys right now, you're cussing man because the man say Liverpool are idiot side. Which, by the way, is foolishness. If him say Liverpool are idiot side, you really need to probably not talk to him. Because him no ball, right? A joke. But the fact of the matter is that you war about things like that. Good? Because you're ethnocentric. Now, the opposite of ethnocentric is to be culturally relative. If you're culturally relative, you're the nice kind of kumbaya people. You know, I no culture is right, no culture is wrong. We are all, you know, just different. I am judging you based on your own standards, you know, do what you want, do that sort of thing. So I'm a Jamaican, I'm not very culturally relative. I am very judgmental. Yeah, I'm like, no, that wrong. Him do that and him not do that. That means that I am not culturally relative. I am ethnocentric. Good? Right. Now, the last one I'm going to look at is culture shock. Culture shock. Now, culture shock is the feeling of confusion which one experiences when it is you're exposed to new or different norms and values, strange norms and values. Come again. Culture shock is the feeling of confusion. Yeah, that one experiences when you are introduced or, you know, you are exposed to different norms and values, strange norms and values. Now, culture shock is not when you go to some place new. If you go to some place new and you're awed by their norms and values, that's not culture shock. You like what you see, you're like, oh my Lord, this is where, you know, I really want to visit and I would like to live here. That is not culture shock. Culture shock speaks to that feeling where you can't imagine that they would do that. Like, oh my God, what is that? That you end up all left. No, sir, you wonder what kind of people this. That is culture shock. Yeah? Many times when you get the multiple choice question, them say define culture shock. And the first answer, A, is going to say going to some place new. And all on a tick A. We don't ever read B, C, and D, you know. Count of sure, sir, A. Culture shock is not going to a place that is new. Culture shock is not being exposed to new norms and values either. Culture shock is the feeling of confusion that you get when the norms and values are strange, when it is something that you don't accept, you reject it, you don't believe that it is right. So I remember the first time I traveled and I went on a bus in New York and the man was on the bus and the man just spit on the floor of the bus. Just spit on. And when me see me like, hey, you know, me ready for talk to him, but me see nobody else now do nothing. And me say me uncomfortable for the entire bus trip because me can't understand how the man would spit in the bus. Literally, me kind of jump when me see him do it. And then after that, me I think say me need to move, but everybody else just now pay him no mind. Me I wonder how nobody now say nothing to him because me ready for talking. And me I say, yo, you know what you do? Everybody else sit down. And I could not concentrate for the entire bus ride. I am just for the entire time, I just have to see the spit. And me, I said, look how it I just come and drown the whole away. I know me I go walk, and me I go slide, and me I go drop it. And Lord God, it was the biggest thing to me because I'm not used to it. It is culture shock. It is what we call culture shock. Yeah? So you need to know these key terms. And we did quite a bit of them today. And I want to do a quick recap of them because you have to know the definitions and differences as it relates to the key terms. That is how you're tested in your multiple choice exams. Good? So the big topic is culture. And as I said before, culture is a part of Module 1. In your syllabus, you have 3 modules. Module 1 has culture, it has methodology, it has the perspectives, which we did the last 2 weeks. Yeah? Culture being the major topic. Good? We gave it a definition of culture. It was given to us by Ralph Linton. Good? And you must know the definition verbatim. You must know who gave it as well. The culture of a society is the way of life of its members, the collection of ideas and habits which they learn, share, and transmit from generation to generation. We also looked at the characteristics of culture. That's the major part of the lesson. The characteristics of culture, ELSTADs, learned, shared, transmitted, adaptive, dynamic, symbolic. You should know also about cultural universals and structural universals. Structural universals being the problems, cultural universals being the solutions. You should know the difference between ideal culture and real culture. Ideal culture, what you say you do. Real culture, what you actually do. Yeah? Just think about how much time you bathe. That are the example. You should also know about sub and counterculture, where the subculture tries to actually coexist with the mainstream culture, whereas the counterculture rejects the mainstream culture. Yeah? And of course, you should know about being ethnocentric, where you believe that your norms and values are correct, your reasoning is superior, your culture is right. And the opposite of ethnocentrism is cultural relativity, where you're saying, no, sir, nobody want to right or wrong, we're just different, yeah? And then finally we did culture shock, that feeling of confusion when you experience a culture that is brand new. Know those key terms. Good? But that is all the time that we have for Cave Sociology today.